Welcome to Columbus News Channel. Operations on the Eastern Front intensified. Unexpected attacks were carried out on the front. Ukrainian armed forces are inflicting heavy losses on the Russian army with their large-scale attacks. Strategic advances continue on critical fronts. Russian soldiers face defeat wherever they step. With the HIMARS missile systems from the United States, new attacks on Russian military points were launched by Ukrainian troops. Important news of support for Ukraine came from Germany. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made important statements about the war. At the same time, the leader of Ukraine had an important phone conversation with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The war has now started to become critical for both countries. Operations on key fronts are now moving in favor of the Ukrainian army. Since the beginning of the war, operations have been launched at many points on the fronts. Especially the eastern and southern fronts are frequently identified as targets in these operations. Again, the Eastern Front became the target of the operations. To remind, this Eastern Front has a critical importance for the countries. This is due to the location of the facade. As it is known, many regions of Donbass in the east are also located on the Russian border. This causes Russia to use these fronts as a land logistics line. However, the Ukrainian army has started to increase its operations on the front in order to cut off this flow of Russian military shipments and attack from the borders. This time, the operation is being increased on the Donetsk front. Operations were launched with record attacks on this front in the past days. Afterwards, the Russian army suffered heavy losses and nevertheless continued its offensive efforts. But the Ukrainian armed forces are trying their luck on this front. This time, a high-precision missile attack was launched at night in the Druzhkovka region on this front. According to the statements, HIMARS missile systems were used in the attack launched against the region. After this attack, it was reported that the Russian military points in the region were seriously damaged and flames rose from these points. It was stated that the Russian army suffered significant losses as a result of an unexpected attack on the region. Although there is no official statement on this issue from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, it is estimated that these attacks may have been carried out against the railway junction in the region. This is quite possible. Because, as it is known, Russia carries out military shipments on many fronts via the railway. If the Ukrainian army stops this flow, the Russian army will not be able to reach sufficient equipment. This will leave the Russian soldiers on the fronts very vulnerable and powerless. For this reason, attacks against such military points are continued day by day. It is known that such points are the target of the Ukrainian army, which has been making strategic moves since the beginning of the war. As you can see, Russian military logistics flow is interrupted on many fronts. If this situation continues in the long term, it is not possible for Russia to achieve success, especially on these fronts. On the contrary, the losses will increase day by day and will reach an irrecoverable size. Russia's army, which has already hit many critical points, is suffering heavy losses on the fronts. Moreover, it does not have support from many countries such as Russia and Ukraine. On the contrary, it receives reactions from many countries for starting the war. This leads to increased sanctions. Ukraine continues to receive support from many countries. This time, news of help came from Germany. According to the statements, Germany will send Boxer RCH-155 self-propelled artillery systems to Ukraine. It has also been reported that the production of these artillery systems has begun. It is stated that these artillery systems are armored personnel carriers with a very powerful engine. In addition, this defense system, which has a range with effective firepower and is automatic, will make a significant contribution to the launch of more powerful operations by the Ukrainian army. As this allows larger and more effective attacks to be carried out, it will cause more casualties for Russia. This will greatly reduce the defense and attack power of the Russian army. In the long run, if the support for Ukraine increases and the sanctions against Russia increase, the war will now proceed completely in favor of Ukraine. In this case, the Russian army will not have much of a chance on the fronts. On the contrary, they may even have to withdraw from the war due to greater losses every day. However, since Russia does not want to withdraw, it may come to the fore with a new mobilization wave. It has done this as a solution in the past months. But to remind you, these soldiers were sent to the front with a very untrained and inadequate equipment. This caused Russia to suffer much more losses than to gain an advantage, and the loss of soldiers to exceed 100,000. For these reasons, it does not seem logical for Russia to make such a move again. On the other hand, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky made important statements. Zelensky stated that he thinks that the Russian Federation can deploy all its forces to try to change the outcome of the war, and to delay the defeat. That's why Zelensky called out to his partners, stressing the importance of strengthening the defense in this period. Emphasizing that this plan of Russia should be disrupted, Zelensky stated that they are prepared for this. He addressed the partner countries, stating that all attempts by Russia to attack new attacks must fail and that this will result in Russia's final defeat. For this, it is necessary to increase the support from the countries. Promises of aid given in order to prevent Russia's attacks should be kept as soon as possible. Previously, it was seen that Ukraine gained many advantages thanks to the support from the countries. For these reasons, the continuation of these aids is of critical importance for the fate of the countries and the course of the war. Zelensky also held a phone conversation with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Ukraine has been moving towards maintaining its relations with its partners from the first days of the year. Zelensky had previously spoken by phone with the Dutch Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, and the Norwegian Prime Minister. It is known that in the phone call with the Prime Minister of Canada, it is known that how the pressure on Russia can be increased more. It is known that Canada is also thanked for its defense aid, financial support, and sanctions against Russia. Canada's defense assistance is expected to be strong in the new year as well. All these aids and sanctions determine the course of the war. Because as aid to Ukraine increases, the Ukrainian army gets stronger and the course of operations is increased. As for Russia, when the sanctions are increased, the Russian army is getting weaker and economic problems are starting to break out on the Russian side. For this reason, relations with countries have become much more important now. In the long run, the course of all these events will be shaped more clearly according to the decisions of the country's leaders and the steps taken on the fronts. There is no longer any margin of error for either side. Especially if it is desired to gain an advantage and success on certain fronts, it has been essential to make progress in the strategic direction and with the right steps. Otherwise, one side's fault will become the other side's advantage. This will determine the fate of the countries. In these days when the violence of the war has increased considerably, all kinds of moves have a much more important effect. We'll see what happens in the next few days. We have reached the end of another video. You can support us by liking the video. You can easily follow new videos by subscribing. I wish you all a war-free day. See you.